I'm Di Kelly. I'm the new editor-in-chief of the Economic and Labour Relations Review. The ELRR, which is much easier to say, is the combined home of heterodox economics and labour studies, labour relations, employment relations in Australia. We are unusual in that we're a multidisciplinary journal and also that we have normative aspirations. That is, we pride ourselves on publishing research that develops rights-based, equality-based, justice-based approaches to labour relations and socio-economic policy. I'm here today to celebrate with 3 of the 4 authors who do just that. They are the authors of the article that was voted the best published article in the ELRR in 2022, the article Inequality Regimes in Male-Dominated Trades, What Role Do Apprenticeship Intermediaries Play? It was written by the 3 of the people here, Larissa Bamberry, Donna Bridges, Elizabeth Wulff and Branka Krivokapic-Skoko. And it's my absolute delight to welcome you here today, Larissa, Donna and Elizabeth.
Thanks,
Again,
Donna.
congratulations.
Thank you.
I would also like to make an acknowledgement of country and acknowledge the First Nations ownership and custodianship of the unceded lands for which all the people in this interview and discussion are standing. And I would like to honour leaders past, present and future. 2022 was a mammoth year for the journal and the competition was really intense. So winning the Nevile-Plowman Prize for Best Article was a fabulous achievement, but then it was a fabulous article. So what I would like to do now is take the opportunity to talk about your paper and hopefully delve a little deeper on how you put it together and the choices you made along the way. Let's just think the paper itself, of course, was about the, why don't you tell me about the paper and tell us about the paper, because you're so much more familiar with it and you have done such a sterling job with it. Would one of you like to respond?
Okay. Well, the paper is about the role that group training organisations play in facilitating or creating barriers for women who are wanting to enter the trades in male-dominated industries. It's part of a much larger project that we've been doing generally about the role about women in trades in regional Australia in particular, and how they are able to get into male-dominated areas. And I guess one of the things that really inspired us in the project was that all 3 of us have been aware of industry projects and government projects to try and stimulate women to get into the trades for more than 30 years. And despite that, we still see very small numbers of women in trades. And so that was the initial sort of starting point for the research project. But we also wanted to explore not just the barriers and the problems, but also what were some of the things that actually, what were the success stories? What were some of the good things that came out that we heard about from talking with industry and other, some of the apprentices and some of the other groups? Donna, did you want to add anything about the project in general?
Well, I think this paper is indicative of the fact that we did find quite a lot of barriers, even though we went into the project looking at what enables women to succeed in the industry, because we are aware that small percentages can still make up actual large numbers of people. So we wanted to explore what does work and be able to disseminate that information throughout the industry and training organisations. And this is about one of the significant barriers that we found, although the discussion that Larissa led about GTOs, I think, is overall very favourable.
Can I just chime in and ask you, can you tell me a bit more about what are GTOs, please? showing my
Sure.
ignorance here.
Group training organisations are essentially they're organisations that are designed to try and smooth out some of the problems that we have in the training market, where, and particularly in regional Australia, they're a really important facilitator of placing apprentices into appropriate workplaces. So they can act, there's a range of different ways that GTOs operate. They can be community organisations, they could be registered training organisations, they can be operating more like an industry third party, like I get the word now that I need, an organisation that places workers who are casual or part-time. So there's a range of different ways they can operate. They can operate for profit or for community benefit. They might be related to trade unions, etc. But their role is to actually be the formal employer of the apprentice, and then to develop relationships with employers within the industry that facilitate that issue. If something happens to the apprentice during their apprenticeship and they can't continue with the same employer, if there's a fluctuation in the market, the employer no longer has work for an apprentice, they can go back to the group training organisation and say, can you help us find somewhere else to place this apprentice because they can't complete all the work with us. And similarly, if there's some problems, with a lot of the group training organisations, if there's a hiatus in the workplace in the on-the-job training, then workers can go off and they can provide the off-the-job training as well. So they can sort of help to actually smooth that process and reduce the problems that might come up in an apprenticeship, particularly in a rural area where there often aren't a lot of employers. There's not as much density of employers in a particular industry. So yeah, on the whole, they're generally a positive support to industry and to apprentices. They often provide a lot more personal one-on-one support to apprentices and help them if they're going through a rough place in their mental and emotional life as well. Yeah, so they're generally positive.
Thank you very much. You know, GTOs sort of is an unusual term, but it's actually quite a common effort, isn't it, in some of the apprenticeship areas? I suspect perhaps more so in regional areas, which are a bit further away from the big cities. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair call, although we do find that there are quite a few in metropolitan areas as well, and that they cover, in metropolitan areas, we found organisations that covered, you know, thousands of different kilometres even within Sydney,
Yes.
but also had a lot more employees and employers to choose from. But it's that problem in the regional areas is when there's not enough employers to choose from and within a particular industry, and it makes it hard for the individual apprentice to find and make those connections. So it helps to smooth out some of those rough edges.
Thank you, Larissa. Now, you, in terms of your work, what you do is then put it in use a model to build it into a scholarly piece of work. And I wondered if you would like to tell us a little bit about ACCA's model and how it kind of gave your work the structure that it had.
Yeah, well, I guess we've all been working with ACCA's ideas of inequality regimes for a while, and thinking about it in terms of organisational level, a way of understanding how inequality works at the organisation. And it's a fairly comprehensive model because it gives us capacity to look at culture and structure and individual experiences to some extent, although, yeah, there are some criticisms. But I think one of its great strengths is that that it really provides a useful platform for thinking about the dimensions of inequality in an area. We did critique it on the basis that it focuses more on the organisational level than the industry level, but we do think it can be adequately adapted and implemented to help us analyse these issues, those parameters of inequality on an industry-wide level.
And in fact, that's how you kind of extended the model, wasn't it, beyond the organisation or establishment level? Yeah, no, thank you. We love the data. It's got a wonderful use of qualitative data, and you present it strongly, but also highlighting nuances. Do you want to comment on how you use the data, how you got the data, what were the challenges, and also perhaps talk about what came with the results and anything that surprised you?
Okay. Donna, do you want to, or Elizabeth actually, do you want to talk about how we collected the data?
Sure, thanks, Larissa. Well, the project was run over several years. We began it in 2018, and we started with industry consultations, and from there we recruited volunteers to be interviewed from each of our regions, and we did one-on-one in-depth interviews, and we ran a focus group of apprentices, and it was, you know, laid back. We had really keen women, really interesting women. It was great interviews, great information, and you know, the focus group went really well. They bounced off each other. You let those run themselves. The girls all talk to each other more than, you know, we're just along for the ride in that context with some minor guiding. And we had some great talkers. So that's always good in those situations. So, and the industry consultations were full of, for all its challenges, most people in the industry are interested in these issues and want to participate and want to make these changes as well. So we had a lot of support across industry, from organisations, from government agencies, from employers, and from the women themselves predominantly. And I think whilst we were focusing at that point on the successes, and the barriers kind of snuck in there, maybe a little bit, not some of our participants weren't maybe aware of some of the things that we picked up on, but certainly there was a lot of support and from the women to participate, and we got some really good data that way from everybody that we encountered.
Were there any surprises then in the data?
Would you like to take on that, Donna?
Yeah, we talked about this earlier, Di, and I think I found it surprising. Although the literature talks about these barriers and talks about limitations in the industry in terms of how women are treated, in terms of how a sexual harassment claim might be treated, I was surprised to find a very loose approach to how sexual harassment or bullying, or in this case with this paper, an actual sexual assault, was dealt with, but also how it is perceived. So it is often perceived as a boys will be boys situation, as the women are perhaps interlopers, so we are expecting some of this behaviour, that sometimes the girls are encouraging it. There's something they have done or they haven't done, and in this case, the focus on the GTO that Larissa took on was very much that the girl hadn't done herself any favours. So not a no means no approach by any means. And there were other stories that came out of this study. There were even people would tell us stories outside of the study. They'd say, "Oh yeah, I know somebody who runs a construction company, and they took on a girl, but then they had to get rid of her because she started sleeping with the boss." You know, that was one of the stories that we heard. And and she got all these opportunities that the others weren't getting because she was sleeping with the boss. And I inquired as to the age of the apprentice that was sleeping with the boss, who was, 17, 18. And the boss was 40, And I said, they didn't get rid of the boss, they got rid of the apprentice. So it just seems that there's a lot that is taken for granted in the industry, that this will happen. And even in the GTO, that Larissa really went in depth an examination of that particular GTO, took on somebody who had been removed from his own workplace for sexual harassment. They took him on as a member of their board. So it does seem as though there is a lot of tolerance. So for me, that was the very big surprise.
It's fabulous. Not fabulous, no.
No.
Not fabulous.
Surprises were surprising.
The surprise was very surprising. Listen, a last question, because it's we could talk all day, but is that you're saying this is part of a bigger project? Where's the bigger project going, and what are you working on now? You know, are we going to have some more wonderful material from this group?
Oh, we're certainly hoping still to publish some more items, definitely. We've actually been quite surprised by how much our work has been picked up by policy workers and by government agencies. We're aware, for example, that in Victoria, our work has been used to support the funding of a project that was by Tradeswomen Australia in Victoria, who had been charged to place 100 young women into male-dominated apprenticeships over 24 months. So we're working with them to explore how that's going and how they're finding some of the barriers and their experience of that. And we're also aware that the papers that particularly Donna has led another paper that was particularly focused on the vocational education and training sector, looking explicitly at that off-the-job training side of things. And that's been picked up in federal parliament in an inquiry into the vocational education and training sector. And Donna, did you want to also add some other aspects of how that's being used by other academics and other people as well?
I think New South Wales government, Trade Pathways for Women, used our work as well and quoted us, and have are now writing a report and had a literature review. So they used our work coming into their big project, and they are using our work in their report. So I think this is the practical application. We've looked at what facilitates women to get into the trades, what facilitates them to stay there, what are those aspects. Elizabeth's work on social and cultural capital has been quite influential in supporting industry to understand what women need to be endowed with in order to be a success. It's not just about the individual having resilience, we've found, or having that capital. It's about the individual, the resources that the individual has access to, and are they allowed to be part of networks that are vitally important, or are they kind of shunted out of those networks? So so I think our work has been influential on those levels.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, that is just fantastic. It really remains now just to award you virtually. I just might take a moment to explain what is the prize. It honours Professor John Neville, Professor of Economics, and the late Professor David Plowman, who from Economics and Industrial Relations discipline. At the UNSW in 1990, they founded the journal and established its social justice perspective. John Neville is still the journal's patron, but he was honoured at an 80th birthday festschrift a few years back as an economist with a cool head and a warm heart, which is kind of what I think good scholarship should be all about. David Plowman passed away at the end of that year, and was certainly a mentor to me and to many others, and a wonderful scholar at the early days of industrial relations. And David had quite a life. He came from Malta as one of those child migrants at the end of World War II, aged 10. So he was kind of somebody who did amazingly well given the difficult background. The prize, which is accompanied by $500 to the winners, which spread out over 4 is not huge, but is awarded annually only to one paper, the best paper published in the calendar year. It has to meet 3 main criteria: exhibit thorough and rigorous research, is communicated in accessible and convincing prose, and it offers broad scholarly and or policy implications. I'm very happy to say that your paper, Inequality Regimes in Male-Dominated Trades, What Role Do Apprenticeship Intermediaries, GTOs, Play, met all those 3 criteria and more, and therefore was in a close but still clear vote the winning article for the 2022 Nevile-Plowman Prize. On behalf of the whole journal, I'd like to congratulate you very heartily and thank you for a wonderful piece of scholarship.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'd love to thank the journal for giving us the opportunity and the support along the way. I think that the feedback that we got from the reviewers and from the editor-in-chief was fantastic and really supportive. So very much enjoyed the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.